Hello, Vape Village. Welcome to another great session with the wonderful Karys McEwen. I'm wondering, Karys, whether I need to give you a full bio every time we have you on.
No, it's getting repetitive. I'm embarrassed.
Okay. Well, suffice to say, she's a librarian who also is very involved in a range of other library-related pursuits. That just makes you sound vague and sort of exciting.
I like it. It's mysterious.
It's good, isn't it? So Karys is back as per usual to give us some great book recommendations today. What do you want to start with, Karys?
Let's start with a couple of books for year 7 and 8, so our sort of more middle grade readers. So the first one on my list is a really recent local release by an author called Danielle Binks. It's her debut novel. It's called The Year the Maps Changed. It is, as I said, for middle graders, but I'd say probably best suited to more advanced readers in that age range. It doesn't deal with mature themes as such, but sort of quite complicated ideas, and it's quite a convoluted story. So I'd probably be giving it to students that are more advanced or looking for a bit of extension. It's set in 1999 in Sorrento, Victoria. So the author has drawn from her own experiences as a child in that era and that setting. It's a coming of age story about a young girl called Winifred or Fred that also has the backdrop of true political events that took place at that time, which involved a group of refugees that were resettled in that area in the 90s. It's a really good story about finding your moral compass from a young age. And I think that's probably an idea that most people don't think about until it's in hindsight. It's quite nice that this story raises those ideas of a moral compass for young people so that they can think about it as it's happening. But it's also just a really lovely personal story about a curious young girl and a reflection on the changes that happen at that time in someone's life. So I highly recommend The Year the Maps Changed by Danielle Binks.
It's been getting a lot of positive buzz online, particularly from some other YA authors. So I think it might be a really good read.
Yeah, a nice one for adults as well, I'd say. There might be a bit of nostalgia there because it's set in the 90s too.
A really long time ago now, I'm not realize it's deeply upsetting.
Exactly.
I read a great tweet from one of my favorite comedians and podcasters who tweeted that now that it's 2020, she can't keep blaming her personality on the 1990s. So that was quite a good tweet.
Very honest. Okay, so my next one is called The January Stars by Kate Constable. And lots of people will be familiar with Kate's work, particularly Crow Country, which is a favourite for Australian English classrooms and has been for quite some time. Just another book as well that was a big favourite of mine that probably got a little bit less attention, and that was called New Guinea Moon. I highly recommend that one as well. But her new book is for middle grade readers. It's a real character-driven novel that explores intergenerational bonds within a very complicated, chaotic family setting. So the main character, Clancy, and her sister Tash, their parents get called away on a family crisis overseas. So they're left to their own devices, and while their parents are gone, the two girls end up kidnapping their grandfather from his aged care facility. So what follows is sort of a rollicking journey with those kinds of ideas, which is a lot of fun. The story is really tightly paced and it's super engaging. I think it's a book that you could give to almost any young reader and pitch it to them because they'll probably find something within the story. There's been a lot of recent releases in Australia and internationally that focus on young protagonists that have an obsession with outer space or the universe or the cosmos. But The January Stars adds something really new to this trend, which I loved. And it plays on that idea that without the dark, we wouldn't have the stars, which is a really, really lovely idea that gets explored in this novel.
I like the intergenerational emphasis as well. I think for young people who might have been isolating with perhaps a couple of generations of their family or maybe have been separated from generations of their family might be a good angle as well to pitch them on.
Yeah, exactly. And so my third one for this age range is, I think, probably the first time since we've been doing these videos that I've recommended an international title. I've been sticking pretty Australian, but I just couldn't go past this one. It's called Here in the Real World by Sarah Pennypacker. Some people might remember her last novel, Pax, which was very popular. This one, Here in the Real World, is a really quiet story. And I think that phrase gets thrown around a lot at the moment, but this is genuinely just a really quiet story where not a lot happens, but at the same time, kind of everything happens within the life of this young protagonist. So his name is Ware. He is a very quiet young boy. He's a real wallflower that has always spent his life thus far really watching from the sidelines and being a bit of a misfit. His parents are really distant, not particularly loving, and they sort of make him feel even more like a misfit. It just explores some really big feelings, and I think young people go through this a lot, maybe even a lot more than we realize. So I really celebrate when stories like this come out. So what happens to little Ware is he ends up being forced to attend a summer camp to ease his social anxieties, which of course is his worst nightmare come to life. But he ends up developing a really beautiful friendship and starts to find his place in the world. And this is just a story that explores identity and belonging in a really authentic, realistic and accessible way, which I absolutely loved and will be recommending, I think, to a lot of my students.
I can imagine a lot of students we both know who might be able to connect to that narrative. It's lovely.
Absolutely.
I also like the idea of a quiet story again in these times when, you know, people's lives have slowed down considerably, and I think maybe it's a chance for young people to connect. You know, readers who might generally be driven to very plot-driven stories to perhaps try something a little bit outside.
Right, and I think especially for that middle grade age range, the upper primary and the lower secondary, a lot of the stories that come out for those students are very plot driven and include an adventure or some kind of action-packed something. So yeah, like I say, I celebrate when there are stories that do rely on those sort of quieter themes and ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. Are we moving up an age bracket now?
Yeah, let's do it. So for year 9 and 10, I've got a couple of recommendations. The first one is Aurora Rising by Amie, Kaufman and Kristoff. This is the first book in the series. The second book just came out, I believe, last week. So if there are students that haven't read this yet, they don't have to wait for part 2. It's out. I haven't read part 2 yet, but I've had a few librarian friends that have, and I've super excited about it. I have read number 1. It was longlisted for the CBCA Awards. It's a CBCA notable book for this year. I actually read something this week that made me think of this, and that was that any book can be studied in an English classroom because all books have a purpose and a context and themes that can be unpacked. And I think genre fiction does typically get a little bit cast aside when we think about text selection, but this is an example of a book that it's a science fiction novel, but it's accessible, it's action-packed, and it has literary merit. And I talk about that a lot because it is an idea that I'm really interested in, the idea of what is quality literature and how, I suppose, subjective that can be. But I highly recommend this for pleasure reading and possibly as a text to be studied. It's a highly entertaining space opera that takes the reader on a really wild adventure through the perspective of, I think, 7 or 8 characters. It's got lots of points of view, and all the different points of view, there are humans and aliens, but all of them are grappling with their own versions of coming to terms with their identity and coping with the challenges of growing up and adolescence, which is really interesting to see that in a science fiction book. It also, of course, has excellent world building and is an incredibly immersive story. The suspense in it as well is really, really carried throughout, and it sets up the reader for a second book. So as I say, part 1 and part 2 are currently out. So if you're interested, you can now read both, which is great.
Absolutely. And I think you and I have spoken extensively, and I've prepared some professional learning for Bait about the idea of independent text study, young people being able to study texts that meet their interests and their point of need. And I think a text like that maybe won't necessarily, as you say, be something that teachers are drawn to for a whole class sort of set text study, nonetheless are such rich sources. I mean, already you've talked about point of view, you've talked about world building, all of those points of access for young people in analysing a text. So it sounds like a really excellent opportunity to get that into some classrooms.
Yeah, definitely. My next book is also genre fiction. It's a romance, which I think equally can have literary merit too, of course. So this one I don't have a copy of, but it's called Only Mostly Devastated by Sophie Gonzalez. And this is a queer reimagining of Greece.
Oh, wow. Okay. I mean,
So,
the queer reimagining, I was like, yep, I'm with this. And then Greece, I was out. I'm not a Greece fan, but sell me on it, Karys.
all right, let me give it a go. But I think you probably already know the story if you know Greece.
Yeah.
But it is a fantastic reimagining. So it tells the story of a short-lived romance between Will and Ollie over one summer. And then when Ollie's family get uprooted and have to move across the country, he, of course, finds himself at Will's high school, his summer love. So as it turns out, Will isn't this sweet, affectionate guy that he met over the summer. He's actually a basketball jock. He's the class clown, and he's a bit of a jerk. So it follows that similar sort of trajectory to Greece. But this is a really perfect story for students that were big fans of Simon vs. the Homo Sapien Agenda or the Love, Simon film. Personally, I hate it when a YA book gets really big and then every book that follows it is like the new version, so like the new Fault in Our Stars or the new Twilight. But I genuinely mean this comparison. I would certainly give this book to those students that loved that story if you can't sell them on the Grease adaptation.
I mean, look, I'm willing to try it despite its connection to Greece, but, yeah. I've already got Greece songs in my head, so I'm going to hate you for the rest of the day. What's up last?
So last, something completely different, something that really took me by surprise because personally it's not something that I might have picked up myself. It's a pirate adventure novel for young adults, Devil's Ballast by Meg Caddy. Have you read this?
No,
I highly recommend it.
I mean, again, pirate story is not really normally my wheelhouse, but
no, neither. But it's absolutely fantastic. It also made the notable list this year for the CBCA Awards. And it's obviously an action-packed adventure, but it's also a really nuanced story. It brings to life one of history's most fascinating anti-heroines. So it is based on a true story, the story of Anne Bonny, who was an Irish pirate who wreaked havoc in the Caribbean in the 18th century. And aside from all the swashbuckling adventure, there's also a really clever exploration of gender roles, feminism, retribution, and ultimately it is a quest for a very particular type of freedom. I think this would be perfect for students that like action and adventure and historical fiction, but I would also be giving this to students that want something really unique. I often challenge my students to read books that are completely out of their comfort zone. That's one reason why I am quite against the genreification of library collections in high school libraries, because I think it allows students to just stick with what they know and not branch out or transition into other types of stories. But this is a great book to challenge students and to give them something completely different, probably to what a lot of them have read before.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really important challenge to give young people. It's something you and I worked on together as well, and putting together a Year 9 reading program to challenge students to really, step outside that. And I think it has so many benefits, obviously, that are, I think, obvious to all of us in the education community. But I think it also, the surprise element for young people, especially cynical young people who aren't always willing to step outside that sort of set boundary. And I think it has so many benefits when you then ask them to study set text in the later years, because they're a little bit more willing and open to engage with those other texts.
Yeah. Exactly.
All right, I'm going to share a book with you now.
Yes.
So this is actually a book I'm rereading at the moment. I was given it as a gift for my birthday, and I had read it before, but it's a rare book that I will reread willingly. So it's My Sister, the Serial Killer.
I love that book.
It's such an amazing book. I read it, I guess, last year sometime. It's just so easy to devour, so I'm actually really enjoying going back to it. The chapters are really short, so I think it's easy, and the plot is so engaging and the characters are so engaging. It's easy to fly through it in a couple of hours, but I'm enjoying going back to it and getting that benefit of a more nuanced second read. If you haven't read it, the premise is there in the title. The protagonist's sister is a serial killer of boyfriends, and so the book opens with the two sisters cleaning up after one of her murders. And goes from there. It's a really exciting, funny, obviously dark, but funny book. Highly recommend it. What are you reading, Karys?
I also recommend that book. My sister actually gave it to me as a gift, and she left it under my pillow just for me to discover, which was incredibly creepy.
That's brilliant.
So yeah, I also recommend that. I also read another book that you recommended last time, which is Sweetness and Light by Liam Piper. I just finished it this weekend. It was incredible. I was completely immersed. Thank you for the recommendation. It was brilliant, and actually made me think about Liam Piper's first novel, The Toymaker, which I also really loved and highly recommend. And then last night I just started reading a new book, which I'm only a few chapters in, but I already would suggest it because it's really brilliant. It's called If I Had Your Face by Francis Cha. It's set in South Korea. And
I've got it on order at the moment.
I'll have to lend you my copy. It's told through the eyes of 4 different women in South Korea, and it explores this world where getting cosmetic surgery is as commonplace as going to the hairdresser, where K-pop stars are the object of all-consuming obsession, and where ruthless social hierarchies dictate people's every move. So it's a really, really interesting exploration of that world, particularly in terms of the cosmetic surgery, which is such a big part of so many women's lives in that part of the world.
Absolutely. Well, we'll compare notes once I get my book delivery, hopefully in the next couple of days. I have another book that I'm going to read next, which I'm also excited about reading, but I'll wait to do a reveal. It's building a bit of tension for our next interview in a couple of weeks.
The suspense is driving me crazy already.
I know. Before we wrap up today, I'm going to embarrass you and recommend, since I didn't do your bio at the beginning, I'm going to recommend one more Karys McEwen product, which is a podcast that Karys does with a colleague of hers and a former share colleague of ours, Annabelle. The podcast is called You Look Tired, and it's got an amazing format where at the moment the two hosts alternate sharing a piece of writing that they've been working on around a particular theme. So the last episode was around, I guess, the way that ideas of beauty and beauty standards have been changed or challenged by this period of self-isolation. So it's a really great format because I love the way you guys share the writing, and then, it develops into a conversation around that particular theme. And I think next season you're going to be welcoming in guest pieces of writing as well. So you look tired. Karys is looking very embarrassed, but you can access it on.
I thought you were going to say that I was looking really tired.
No, I was not going to say that. You can find it on all of your podcast platforms, where you can also find the Vape Village podcast. So two for one on a subscription. Highly recommend. Do you want to add anything about your podcast, Karys?
No, I just want to thank you for the cheeky little plug there. And we're looking for people to join us on our next season to share a piece of writing about a part of their life that is making them tired.
Yeah, I'm already pitching them, but I'm not sure if I'll make it past the cut, even though I am their biggest supporter. No pressure. So thank you once again, Karys McEwen, who is the school librarian at Paran and Richmond High School, soon to return to the physical library, which I'm sure you are a little bit excited about, especially when it has young people in it again. Also the CBCA Victorian Branch President and a judge from this year's CBCA Book Awards.
You put the blurb in
I put it at the end. Just buried the lead. All right. So, Karys, we're going to see you again in a couple of weeks with some more suggestions. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me again.
Bye.